A new report out this weekend says the Russian government is actually pushing state media to promote Tucker Carlson clips. In an article published by the progressive magazine Mother Jones, a translation of a memo sent by the Kremlin to Russian media was published, which said, quote, "It is essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, their negative role in unleashing the conflict in Ukraine, and the defiantly provocative behavior from the leadership of the Western countries and NATO towards the Russian Federation and towards President Putin personally." Tucker loves to just ask questions. So I'll do the same. Do I think Tucker Carlson is a Russian agent? No. He's a provocateur, a contrarian, someone who relishes taking a side no one in their right mind would take. But while I don't think Tucker's working for the KGB, he's been pretty relentlessly pushing misinformation in recent days, specifically as it relates to the conspiracy theory that the U.S. has been funding bioweapons facilities in Ukraine. To hear the Fox News host tell it, this is a scandal of the highest order.
This is kind of a blockbuster story. I have no idea what it means or where it goes, but it's clearly a case where the U.S. government has been lying, has mounted a disinformation campaign, if you will, designed to cover up what it's doing, and nobody in the press corps seems interested in finding out what's at the bottom of this. Why is that?
Now, Tucker would tell you he's not peddling Russian propaganda. He's just asking questions. Why is the media ignoring this blockbuster story? Well, I have a few questions of my own. The first one is, well, why is Tucker pushing a pro-Russian narrative that's already been debunked? Not just by the government officials, but by the many eyewitnesses who've been to the labs and told us they were never a secret and there are no bioweapons. Not one has said otherwise. In the words of Tucker Carlson, "I have no idea what that means or where it goes, but it's clearly a case where Tucker's mounting a disinformation campaign." Now, if you missed it, the trouble began with this bit of testimony from Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland at a congressional hearing last week.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
Now, there is no doubt she could have answered that question much more clearly and quickly. And so she had to clarify in a bit of a follow-up.
If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
So since then, scores of experts who've actually been to these sites have come forward to say there's nothing secretive or sinister about these facilities. People like former Defense Department official Andrew Weber, who has seen the labs many times and joined this show last week.
They function just like your county public health laboratory. They monitor for infectious disease outbreaks. They're sort of a smaller version of the Centers for Disease Control. And indeed, the United States government has been supporting these laboratories since 2005 in order that they have a better system of detecting and responding to infectious disease outbreaks.
Now, is there anything at all sort of nefarious or secretive about these facilities?
Nothing at all. They're totally open, transparent laboratories. I've visited them many, many, many times, as have international visitors and the World Health Organization routinely.
That ought to have been the end of it. Tucker and company asked their questions, they got their answers, and we move on, right? Yet Carlson and his ilk keep fanning the flames. Why? I'm just asking questions here, right? Regular guest Glenn Greenwald joined in last Friday by accusing journalists of relying too heavily on the word of government officials.
Like journalists have been doing for weeks under the guise of fact-checking, is not telling the truth. All they know is that the Pentagon denies it, the CIA tells them it's not true, and then they equate that, they conflate that with proven fact, which is the #1 problem in journalism that we're seeing very pervasively in this war.
Now, why is Glenn Greenwald deliberately ignoring the available evidence and information to further a debunked pro-Russian narrative? Why is he accusing journalists of basically lying without so much as a shred of supporting evidence for the initial claim? Again, I'm just asking questions here. And that brings us to Tulsi Gabbard. On Sunday, the former Hawaii congresswoman posted a video to Twitter in which she absurdly called for a ceasefire and for the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia to all work together to address these labs.
Instead of trying to cover this up, the Biden-Harris administration needs to work with Russia, Ukraine, NATO, the UN to immediately implement a ceasefire for all military action in the vicinity of these labs until they're secured and these pathogens are destroyed.
But here's another question. Again, what on earth makes Tulsi Gabbard think that the Russians are going to negotiate a ceasefire to let that happen? What is she seeing from the Russians that makes her think they're willing to cooperate with anybody on anything right now? And what makes her think they're secret? Tucker Carlson, Glenn Greenwald, Tulsi Gabbard come from different parties, but all thrive on being able to say, no one else is asking the questions. And the reason, of course, is either that the questions make no sense or that we have the answers. They're doing it to get people talking, to keep them watching. And you know what? It's working. Joining us now is Peter Wehner. He's a conservative columnist, contributor to The Atlantic and The New York Times. Peter, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So, a lot of these folks love talking about how much they love America, they love American values, before telling us how our country is basically the same as the Russians. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it is weird, especially in case of Tucker Carlson, somebody who had been a lifelong Republican. And if you remember during the Cold War, one of the defining features was this notion that of American patriotism. Gene Kirkpatrick in '84 gave a speech accusing Democrats of blaming America first. And in this case, they're blaming America first. It's an interesting thing. I mean, I agree with you. They portray themselves as loving our country. I actually don't think that they love this version of our country. When you think about the Trump line about make America great again, I'd emphasize the again. I think that they believe that America is a deeply corrupt country taken over by progressive forces. And they are essentially siding either directly or de facto with Putin. And in doing that, they're, of course, echoing some of the stuff that Donald Trump has been saying, not just during his presidency, but long before. There's a kind of enchantment and infatuation with some of them for Putin, for Russia, for authoritarianism.
But you do see a divide. I mean, you watch Tucker Carlson, and then the next hour you can watch, Sean Hannity, and he's saying the exact opposite and saying that, the Biden administration's not being tough enough on Putin.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there isn't a single unified voice on the American right. In fact, most of the American right is actually siding with the United States against Putin. But there are these prominent examples. And remember, Tucker Carlson isn't just anybody. He's the most important figure, not just at Fox News, but arguably one of the most important figures in American media. He gets the most ratings. I think he's most in tune and in touch with the base on most issues. It matters when somebody like him speaks out. And why he's doing it, it's hard to tell. It could be for ratings. My own sense is that he's a kind of adolescent nihilist, a dime store nihilist, as you said, a provocateur who likes to stir up trouble. But whatever his motivation is, he is peddling conspiracy theories and lies. And as you say, these questions, so-called questions that he had, they're not questions. They are conspiracy theories and lies in the form of questions. And it's not the first time he's done it. He did it with the January 6th, accusing that of being a false flag operation. He's done it with vaccines. So these are links in a very malicious chain for Tucker Carlson.
So But what do you make then of Tulsi Gabbard and Glenn Greenwald? I mean, Greenwald describes himself as a leftist, and Tulsi Gabbard claims she's a Democrat. So it's not necessarily by party, right?
It's not by party. It's by disposition, I think. It's by temperament. And there is such a thing as a kind of conspiracy mindset. I think in the case of Greenwald, he's just been reflexively anti-American, anti-establishment. So anything that the American government says, I think his first instinct is to say it's a lie. Gabbard, I don't know, but I wouldn't think about this simply or even primarily in terms of partisanship or parties. I think what we're talking about is a certain cast of mind, and it's a very malignant cast of mind, and it's doing a lot of harm.
Yep, I agree. Peter Wehner, thank you very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.